This is the Anthropology Podcast, the podcast where we optimize the bodies, brains, and lifestyles of entrepreneurs, go-getters, and world-changing innovators.
Welcome to the Anthropology Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Walker. As an anthropologist and naturopathic doctor, I work with entrepreneurs and go-getters to optimize the health and performance of these world-changing innovators. You know, people kind of like you. With us today is Sachin Patel. Sachin is a chiropractor by background and a functional medicine practitioner, and he has evolved into what he now describes as a patient advocate. Sachin has become a very dear friend, and the thing that has always intrigued me about him is this immense power and wisdom he has to be able to take complicated ideas with respect to one's health and put them and formulate them into a way that is just so simple and so accessible. Sachin has become a thought leader in the area of health and health innovation as it pertains to the delivery of patient care. He has so many fundamentally provocative yet supportive ideas all rolled into one. And our conversation today was really so fascinating. We talked about how to build an ideal biohacked home. We talked about parenting. We talked about things we should be eating, things we should be avoiding. And really then we stepped back and we talked a lot about the philosophy of health and living. I know you're going to find this conversation so enjoyable. I absolutely did. And without further ado, Dr. Patel. Sachin, it's so great to have you on the podcast. Thanks so much for taking the time to be with us.
You know what? It's really my pleasure and my honor. So I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Yeah. So listen, I want to hear a little bit about your journey on how you got to this place as a healer, as an entrepreneur. I know you came through this route as a chiropractor, and I know that your role and your title is an evolving piece of your identity as a healer. And I'm wondering if you can take us through a little bit of that journey.
Absolutely. So I never thought I would be where I am right now. And it's partly a lie. I always had a vision for something greater and something bigger and having a bigger impact, but I just didn't know in what capacity that was going to be. When I graduated school, I started working in a sports clinic called Norwood Chiropractic, and I started off as an active release technique practitioner. So I was doing a lot of manual therapy on your weekend warrior all the way up to your Olympic gold medalist. So we had a lot of, spectrum in terms of the people who we were helping, how we were helping them, and the difference we were making in people's lives. So I was on top of the world. And then 2006 rolls around, a couple of years after graduating and being in practice, and putting in hard work, of course. So that news report changed my life because the news report was actually about elbow pain and tennis elbow and golfer's elbow and, stuff like that. And as a result of that news report, I actually ended up with about 50 to 80 new patients, and none of them except one person had elbow pain. And that elbow pain for her was caused by rheumatoid arthritis. Everyone else that came in to see us had fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, some other autoimmune condition, an unlabeled diagnosis that they were kind of seeking answers for from their practitioners. And these people were essentially refugees of the medical system. And I didn't know what to do with them because they didn't have problems I could just rub away or problems I could active release away or even mobilize away. Chiropractic is very powerful, not as a procedure, but as a lifestyle. Okay, so chiropractic is a philosophy and a way of life, and it gets distilled down into a procedure in the current practice and paradigm that most practitioners operate out of. So I was providing a very distilled, version of chiropractic, mainly focused on musculoskeletal care. And what I realized is that I couldn't help these people because that's not what they needed at that time and in that moment. And that wasn't going to be the thing or the service that, really made the difference for them. But what I also realized, and more importantly realized, is that neither were their doctors. Their doctors weren't helping them either. And that's why they were in my office at this point. And, as a practitioner yourself, you've probably recognized when you can't help somebody, it's like a gutting feeling. It's like not being able to help your child if they're in trouble or if they're in pain. And that's how it felt for me. I said, what do I do with these people? I don't know where to refer them because they've already been to every so-called specialist and they've already tried every drug at this point. What do we do with these people? And around the same time, I was having my own health challenges, not debilitating. I was still functional, but not optimal. And so I had digestive issues. I had chronic fatigue. I had pain. Again, I was functioning, but not to my highest level. And so I started researching for myself about functional medicine, and I started, learning from one of my mentors, Dr. Ron Grisanti. And once I learned about functional medicine, which has a lot of similarities to naturopathic medicine, there's a ton of overlap there because the truth overlaps, of course. And what I realized is that we need to take a more root cause based approach. So I started incorporating that into my traditional chiropractic and musculoskeletal practice and started getting amazing results with our existing patients. And they started reporting that some of their other non-musculoskeletal issues started going away. You give somebody fish oil, and that has hundreds of benefits in the body. You give them, the right nutrients, and that has hundreds of benefits in their body. So we started seeing some dramatic improvements, not only in our chiropractic and sports practice, but we also started seeing improvements in non-sports related issues that people were dealing with. So I said, you know what, I can't keep this a secret. And at the time, the person that I was working for didn't really want to expand into this, uncharted territory, if you will. So I started to take it upon myself and said, I can't know this and not apply it. She didn't know it, so she wasn't missing out on anything, but I knew what we were capable of and the knowledge base that we had accumulated as a result of looking for answers, for myself, but also for people that I couldn't help. And that's usually where it starts. When you can't help somebody, you start looking for a way that you can, because you never know when that person that needs your help is going to be yourself or a family member. So, I took a leap of faith in myself and, like most entrepreneurs do, and I didn't know what I was doing, like most entrepreneurs don't. And I just said, you know what, I'm really passionate about this and I know I can make a difference. And there were really no best practices at the time. So we're talking about 10 years ago now. There weren't any really well-established functional medicine practices that I was aware of. I'm sure they existed, but it wasn't mainstream or becoming mainstream as it is now. So I didn't really have somebody to shadow or mentor. So I had to really create the process myself. But the cool thing about that is I was able to create a system that I wanted. I was able to create a healthcare platform and a practice that I would want to go to, that I would want my parents to go to, that would want my loved ones to go to. Instead of creating and replicating something that already existed, I started from scratch. And the model in our practice is essentially, let's do the exact opposite of what's happening right now and see what happens, right? So instead of making people wait, we don't make them wait. Instead of having them have a 1 or 2 page intake form, we have an extensive intake form. Instead of not pre-screening people, making sure that they're ready for care, we pre-screen everyone to make sure that they're going to get the most leverage out of the services that we provide. We also, instead of treating the symptoms, treat the root cause. Okay, instead of having people come in more and more every year and do more and more testing every year, we do less of it. Instead of not empowering the patient, we empower the patient. And what we noticed is that once we started doing the exact opposite of what kind of mainstream healthcare was doing, we started getting people who weren't getting better. And it wasn't us. I don't want to take credit for people getting better. It was really the patient. So in traditional healthcare, most of the responsibility is placed on the doctor to fix the patient. That's why people complain about their doctors. Really, they need to take ownership over their health and start figuring out how they can be better patients instead of seeking better doctors. And I also believe that as practitioners, as teachers, if you will, we need to be role models for our students and for our communities. And so we took it upon ourselves as a practice to really lead by example as much as we can. And that's why our office is called the Living Proof Institute, because we have to role model for our communities and we can't tell people to do things they're not doing. So the journey has led me to, opening up a practice in Cincinnati and then moving up to Toronto and starting a practice here. And now I've got, 5 or 6 practitioners that work on our team, and we're always adding more. And now I oversee the operations. And what I also do is I function as a practice coach. So I coach practitioners and help them set up the infrastructure and culture in their practices so that they can have a similar level of success, if you want to call it that. I don't like to use that word because it's so definitive, and success can mean different things to different people, and people who are successful are always growing. So what success means to me today and what it means to you today might mean something completely different to you even tomorrow. So I use that word very loosely, but it allowed us to make an impact. I think that's a better word, and prove a model of healthcare that really wasn't being practiced. And now here we are. So I'm grateful to be on this call with you and be able to even share this with other people and hopefully inspire them to follow what they in their hearts know is right.
Yeah, and even as you're talking, I'm sitting here and I'm if I had a wall in front of me, I would beat my head against it, because it seems so counterintuitive that we would, rush people through a system, or we would make them wait, or we wouldn't investigate to really try to find the root cause. And I love that you are living that. And one of the things I think that you are just so talented at is taking complex health concepts, and sometimes even concepts that we complicate ourselves, and making them so easy for people to understand, always with a call to action on the back end of it. When you are talking to patients and you're in that screening process, what do you find is one of the most debilitating thought patterns that some of those people are bringing to the table when they first engage in a conversation with you?
Yeah, great question. So here's the thing, and one of the things that's really important for practitioners that are listening to this, and any entrepreneur that's listening to this, is culture and core values. So the people that you bring into your business have to be an extension of they're essentially become an extension of your business. So if I'm building a practice, I don't want people that have one foot in the door and one foot out the door. I want people, just like I want my team members, all in, because these people are going to be representative of the brand and of the culture and of the process. So it's very important that you bring the right people in, especially in the beginning stages of your practice, for a couple of reasons. One, because they're the brand, and then two, because when you encounter, especially starting off a new business or a new practice, when you encounter problem clients, because you're so eager to take their money and start their care and you're excited that there's people in your calendar, when you fall for that trap, those people create potentially a lot of issues for you, which then prevent you from growing, right? Imagine having 5 or 6 patients on your calendar every week that just drive you nuts, okay? Now, those people are going to prevent you from growing, because if you want to double your practice the way you're currently operating, that 6 is going to turn into 12. Okay, now next week you're going to have 12 people that you don't want to see. And if you triple your practice, then you're going to have even more, and the number just keeps going up. So when we scale our business, we also scale our problems, not just profit. So we have to keep that in mind. When we take people who are ready to receive and people who are ready to engage and people who deeply value what you have to offer, there's a shift in not only the vibration of that person, but there's a shift in your business that starts taking place, because these people now feel like they're actually part of something and they belong to something. They belong to a movement. And what I tell, my clients is that every person that comes in here has the same core values, and that helps us grow. Because if you go see a practitioner, you don't want the person that was in before you not doing any of the work, right? Because that drags the practitioner down. It drags the morale of that conversation down. You want everyone in your schedule to be ready and committed and fired up and grateful and appreciative, because that's how you're going to be. So these core values have to match. And when there's a mismatch, that creates a lot of turbulence and friction, and practices don't grow. The universe just doesn't allow that growth to take place, because it's not in the best interest of both parties, if that makes sense. So we screen everyone and we ask them 3 very important questions, and they have to agree to these core values. And if they don't, then they're not going to be a good fit. So in less than a minute, I can figure out who's going to be a good fit and who isn't. The first one is that we do not treat any diseases, but instead we co-create health. So this is going to be a partnership where we're both going to work on building health instead of treating diseases. If you're looking for that paradigm, then you've already tried that, and people will offer that to you for free. Here in Canada, you can go and get that paradigm for free, and they'll give you all kinds of drugs. They'll cut out all kinds of body parts. They won't even charge you anything for it. If you want that, then it's available to you. But if you're looking to take responsibility and ownership and build health and displace disease and dysfunction, then we're more likely to get really good results. The second core value is that virtually all disease begins and ends in the digestive system. So what you eat, how you eat, why you eat, who you eat with, what's interfering with that process, all matters. And so literally your food becomes you. So who you want to become, you have to eat first. And then the third one is that the patient or the client ultimately determines the outcome, not the practitioner. And so there's a big shift in responsibility of outcomes when we work with clients, or when my practitioners rather work with clients, because ultimately, no matter how good the surgeon is, no matter how good the drug is, no matter how good the supplement is, how good the testing is, it's ultimately the patient that determines the outcome. So we set these tenets and core values and make them very clear right from the very beginning. And if people don't agree to one or any of these, then we know they're not going to be a good fit. And what happens typically, because we have a process that our clients have to go through before they come into our office, they're usually ready to start. And so we don't have any cold traffic calling us. It's all very strategic. People are following our movement. They're following what we're doing. They're part of an autoresponder series before they get to that point where they can call. It's not like, hey, you just went to McDonald's, call us and we're going to get you healthy, right? We're usually people that are looking and seeking not just information, but people who are seeking wisdom. And if I could just comment on that really quick, we have a overabundance of information, right? And what that means is that anyone can become a doctor from a knowledge standpoint, right? That information is at our fingertips. In fact, you can probably agree to this. I forgot probably 95% of what I learned in school, right? And the other 5% I recall, but everything that I do in my business now has to do with what I've learned since I've graduated, not when I was learning this stuff, right? So it's that clinical practice, and it's helping people, not helping people, figuring things out that makes us better clinicians and entrepreneurs in this case. So there's no shortage of information. In fact, information is so readily available that it's worthless. What there is a huge shortage of is wisdom, and that's why people come to us. That's why we consult with organizations and companies and practitioners, not because the information isn't out there, but the wisdom isn't out there, and how to put that information in a package and make sense of it. That's what we offer in really our clinical services, but also in our practice coaching services.
Yeah, and I think it's so insightful, but also helpful for people in terms of being able to engage with them, maybe first through a talk or through social media, and then through an autoresponder series or whatever pathway it is that you want to take them along. And I say this to practitioners all the time, and frankly to my patients, is that it's a huge risk to step into the office and be one-on-one with a practitioner. And I think by the time people get to that point where certainly they're going to commit to seeing you or someone like me, like there's going to be a call to action for them to legitimately change their lives and take responsibility. And I think it takes people a while to frame that for themselves and be willing and ready to do that. And I think you just do such a great job of empowering them along the way. And I think that it's a really great segue to this concept that I know you're extremely passionate about, and that is motivation. And you've authored a book called The Motivation Molecule. And can you share with us what it is that you're talking about when you say the motivation molecule?
Sure. So specifically, the motivation molecule is dopamine. And in the process of researching and creating the soon-to-be released book, I just wanted to clarify, what I thought I was going to do naively is I'm just going to figure out everything that affects dopamine. And I'm just going to give people nutraceuticals, I'm going to do some lab testing, genetic testing, and I'm going to figure out why they're not motivated. And so the idea originally started off as that. And as I started researching this and putting time and energy and effort into it, I realized, man, there's way more to this than just giving people dopamine precursors, right? There's so much more to getting people motivated. And what I discovered is that there's 10 facets that keep us motivated, that keep us engaged in whatever we're motivated to accomplish. And these include things like relationships, right? If we don't have the right relationships, then our motivation sucks because a lot of stress comes from relationships. Mother Nature, connecting with Mother Nature is very, very important. We've lost that connection, but there's important neurological signaling that takes place when we're walking, when we're in that type of environment. Spirit and purpose also plays a role in motivation. It's hard to motivate somebody to do something that they're not aligned with at a deeper level. Nutrition, of course, plays a role because we need the building blocks of these chemicals in our body, of the neurotransmitters in our body. Stress plays a role in motivation because stress depletes dopamine. Mindset plays a role in motivation. The brain is the most powerful thing ever studied in our lifetime, and it's the most studied thing in our lifetime, and it's the most powerful tool that we possess. But how we steer our mind also matters as well. And yes, supplements and medications can play a role for some people in getting them motivated. Communication can play a role. If you don't know how to communicate to somebody's communication style, then they might not be as motivated. But if you do communicate and you click in that communication style, then motivation increases. The same message, just spoken a different way or with a different set of words, changes everything. Lifestyle plays a role in motivation. What time you go to bed is going to affect how well your brain heals. What type of light you have in your environment is going to affect the type of neurotransmitters that you make. All of these things kind of pair together. And then the last one, and certainly there's more than these, is accountability. So how accountable are you to someone or something, So some people will come into the office and say, I have no motivation. And I'll ask them a simple question. How many days of work have you missed in the last year? And they'll say, I haven't missed a single day of work. I'm like, well, you're motivated to go to work, aren't you? He's like, oh yeah, I have to be there. And that's accountability, right? They have to be there because someone's expecting them to be there. The team is relying on them being there. Their boss or their employer is relying on them being there. Or if they're the boss, then their employees are relying on them being there. So accountability plays a huge role. And so these are the things that I kind of uncovered. And then it starts really with a self-assessment. How are these areas in your life functioning? And the cool thing about this, and really the cool thing about having a holistic approach to anything, is that this doesn't just affect your motivation, right? This is going to affect a lot of areas in your life. It's going to affect your health. It's going to affect your partnership. It's going to affect how you raise your kids. It's going to affect your business and how successful you become. It's going to affect how long you live, how much you can contribute into society, how much people like you. There's so many things that spill off of these 10 facets that I just discussed, that it's really a pursuit of that everyone should engage in, not just to be motivated to make more money. I think, the currency of the universe is not money, it's love, and it's other things and circumstance that comes our way. But, I think motivation is something that's very misunderstood. And a lot of people go to, they might go and watch a movie that motivates them, or they might watch a video on YouTube that motivates them, or they might go see Tony Robbins and that motivates them. But it's usually short-lived because it's just a flash in the pan, right? If you don't have these other things in place, then that motivation is not going to be sustainable. And so this is what we teach. I've done a whole webinar on this, but this is what we teach our clients that come see us, what we teach our doctors that we train, and I also teach this system and approach to the public as well.
Yeah, and dopamine I find is such an interesting neurotransmitter, and I always joke with my entrepreneurs that I work with that we're all a little bit of dopamine junkies, because we kind of crave that. I find that's just sort of an inherent characteristic of the entrepreneurial personality type, as it were. Are you someone who you were aware of throughout your life craved activities that promoted dopamine? Was that sort of a dominant neurotransmitter for you?
Yeah, so actually, interestingly enough, through my genetic testing and organic acid testing that I've done, I have a high dopamine turnover. And so one of the things that I'm working on right now is working with highly successful people. So my wish list has someone like Joe Polish, who's I've become friends with now, and getting his most highest performing entrepreneurs and getting organic acids test results on them and genetically screening them for dopamine receptor sensitivity and how well they produce dopamine, to see if there's a connection there between their success and how they're genetically and biochemically hardwired. What's really interesting is the journey of many entrepreneurs is addiction. So they start with an addiction. If you talk to a lot of people who are really successful, they started off with a drug addiction. Okay. And so that's a dopamine related issue. And what happened is these people found dopamine can be released and secreted through success. And so when they started running successful companies, right, that's when the drug habits started going away, because now that dopamine was being filled with something else. So you'll find a lot of people, and especially when entrepreneurs are struggling in their business, you'll find that they turn to drugs and alcohol because they're dopamine junkies. And when their business becomes successful, now they're getting dopamine from the right sources, successful sources, instead of getting dopamine from sources that are, not contributing to their success.
Yeah, and I find that really interesting in my practice as well. And I also find this population, they're also yes junkies. And so they've historically been those people who say yes to everything. They're on this board and they're on that board and they're starting this thing, because you just get such a great release of dopamine when you are starting something fresh and new. And it's interesting when you start to bring that realization to that, how many of these people go, oh, I was completely getting involved in these things for the wrong reasons, just for a physiological high. Yeah, so it's a really similar observation from that perspective. Sachin, how do you stay motivated? Like, what is the thing that you do on an ongoing basis that just puts you back into that zone? Because you've got a lot of initiatives going on and a lot of pressures, and so how do you do it?
You know what? I work towards one goal, and I just stay on that purpose. And then anything I take on has to, in some way, contribute or serve to that purpose. And it makes it easy. Everyone's going down the same river, and everyone's contributing into the same river instead of trying to build a whole new river. So that's it. Once you know what you want to do, which is difficult, I'm not going to say it was easy. I mean, it took me 38 years to really figure it out. But once you know that, then you can devote your complete bandwidth to that. And then amazing stuff starts happening.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think there's a big difference between purpose and passion. And I definitely see you living your purpose all the time. And you have I'm going to ruin it, but you have a quote that I have seen I've seen show up in various places attributed to you. And you say that it's consistency, not the storm, that carves the canyon. So what kind of habits do you incorporate into your life on a daily or weekly basis that consistently contribute to an optimal state of health?
Here's where I want to be totally transparent. I'm not perfect, right? And I think you'll probably acknowledge that you're not perfect. So on a perfect day, here's what it would look like. It would be me waking up, having a meditation session with my wife, or I use the Muse as well. So if she's not up, then I'll go and do a session on the Muse. And then I have a moment of gratitude. I kind of mentally plan my day. I do check my email. It's one of the first things I do in the morning because I don't have a secretary. I check every single email. And usually if I wait until 10, I've lost 5 hours because I'm usually up around 4:35ish. So I don't wait. And a lot of people, I don't check email at night, but a lot of people will tell you don't check email first thing in the morning. Well, the only reason somebody would say that is if they have a secretary that's answering their email for them. So we look at if someone like Tim Cook says that, I'm like, dude, you're not checking every email you get, right? So let's be realistic here. And I'm not Tim Cook, so I can't expect to play by those rules. The other thing that I say is that if you're dreading your email, then you need to fix why you're dreading your email instead of avoiding email. Does that make sense? So a lot of people I look forward to emails because I get tons of emails. Like I got an email from you saying, hey, let's do a podcast together. I don't want to wait 5 hours to find out this amazing news. I want to know right away because I know that in my life, I've created circumstances and situations with intent that create positivity in my life. So I check email. It's one of the first things I do actually. And then I'll take a moment and do my, use the restroom, brush my teeth, stuff like that. And I got this from a microbiologist. It might gross some of you out, but don't brush your teeth right when you wake up. So it sounds weird. You can do some oil pulling if you want, but don't brush your teeth right when you wake up because not only does bad bacteria grow in your mouth overnight, so does good bacteria. Okay, don't go to work without brushing your teeth, but don't be so quick to brush your teeth immediately. Just a tip that I got, and I thought it was worth sharing. Funky, but worth sharing. The other thing that I do is I usually go to the gym 4 days a week. I'm very consistent with that. I'm very consistent with exercise. I personally prefer weightlifting. I've tried yoga and stretching and things like that, mobility courses, but my preference tends to be weightlifting. So, find what works for you. That's the other thing. Like, don't do what I do, but find what works for you, something you enjoy doing. Yes, I understand the benefits of yoga, but I'm going to be more consistent doing something I enjoy and like, and then incorporating the yoga periodically into my routine. So that's important too. And meet yourself where you are. If you're going once a week, well, maybe bump it up to 3 times a week. Maybe get a standing desk at work, which I'm standing right now doing this conversation with you. So, try to incorporate activity into your day. Movement increases dopamine. When we go for a walk outside, that increases dopamine. When we have a purpose, and we know what that purpose is, and we know that everything that we're doing is working towards that purpose, that reward and that feel good, which creates an increase in dopamine, comes from that, knowing that we're making an impact and making a difference. But if we have no clue why we're doing things, we're just mindlessly performing tasks because they keep showing up on our desk, then every time you change tasks, that depletes dopamine. So there's all these things to take into consideration. I shower every morning before I go to work. I incorporate a cold shower into my routine because that raises your catecholamines and dopamine as well. And then, I try to walk to work as many days as possible if I'm not dropping off my son. And if I am dropping off my son, we spend about 15 minutes in silence. So we don't talk, we just drive to work, and that's our silent time because it's hard to find silent time with kids and, running a business and a coaching practice. So all these things, kind of play into it. And we both get to collect our thoughts for the day. And, sometimes we'll have a conversation, but we kind of have this mutual understanding that it's our silent time together. And I enjoy the silence of other people. It's kind of weird, but I could sit there and not talk to somebody sitting next to me, but just feel their presence and feel their energy. And to me, oftentimes that's enough. So these are some of the things that I do. I also try to regulate light. So we switched out all the light bulbs in our home. So there's 2700K. So if you ever come to my home, it's like a cave. It's everything's yellowish at night because that helps decrease cortisol in the evening, and it also helps regulate our circadian biology, which helps regulate all of our hormones and so many other things, including our sleep. So I really pay attention to some of these key needle movers. And if a cold shower for a couple minutes a day can impact me for the next few hours, I'll take it. That's a huge ROI from a financial, from a motivational, from a physiological and biological standpoint. So I'll take any advantage I can get. And the cool thing about being a physician is knowing how the body works and then enabling ourselves to take advantage of that and knowing what's going to move the needle the most and applying that instead of trying to do everything. Let's do the things that we know are going to make a difference and things that we can be consistent with.
I love that. And I think that, one of the things that you just said in there is you were talking about why email is a blessing and how you've really come to love it. And I'm going to take that as a personal challenge to really come to love my inbox. Because there are days, I'll be honest, I find it tremendously overwhelming. So I really love that shift, that shift in paradigm. And I think there's probably a lot of entrepreneurs who would benefit from experiencing that shift, because I think it's sort of universal that this is an area of stress for people. I love some of the things that you're doing with your space, and I'm gonna throw a totally selfish question out there to you. We're just in the process of starting a renovation in our home, and one of our goals is that we want to have a health promoting or biohacked home. So optimizing neurology and optimizing the type of air that we're breathing and all of those types of things. If you were going to recommend one thing that we make sure that we put into this renovation, what would you say that is?
I would say take careful consideration of the light. So try to have, you're always going to have overhead lighting, but try to have eye level lighting. So it's the frequency of light, but also where the light is coming from that also matters. If you think about it, the sun is above us midday, right? In the evening it sets. So having lighting that's eye level or lower is going to, physiologically stimulate more of a sunset, like a never-ending sunset, if you will, than, hey, it's 12 o'clock noon outside all the time, right?
Right. I'll take a never-ending sunset any day.
Yeah. So I would start with that. Just be very mindful of the lighting. I would keep the bulbs warm. Now they have bulbs that you can flick on and off like 1, 2, or 3 times, and they go from 5,000, 4,000 to 3,000K. So you can get that yellowish tint that's less stimulating, if you will, and that can make a big difference as well. So I would definitely consider that. We have an infrared sauna in our place. I sleep on a biomat at night, so there's some, maybe woo-woo stuff that I do, but I find it to be extremely beneficial. And I also find that, an air purifier is a good idea, maybe making sure you don't have too much carpeting because that collects a lot of stuff. And then you're probably going to add new furniture in the space, so look for organic furniture that isn't loaded with fire retardants and synthetic chemicals and stuff like that. So you can pay special attention to those things, and of course low VOC paints and building materials, that's also important, so that because these things are all going to be off-gassing for several days, weeks, or in some cases years, depending on how much toxicity is in those things. And we find, like, just a clinical pearl for some of the practitioners listening, if somebody moves into a new home, congratulate them, but also question them. Question what type of furniture they're putting in. Did they get a new mattress? Is that when their health started going downhill? Was there any water damage? What time of year was their home built? Because, they slap these things together and it rains and then they put the drywall up the next day and guess what? You could be in trouble, right? There could be a mold problem. And so, these things are something that we should all take into careful consideration. And it's cool that you're building this space. I would also add a vibe plate to it. Mm-hmm. I know Dave Asprey is a big proponent of that. And those are great because in a small space, you can have a mini gym, if you will, and do all kinds of different exercises. And in a short period of time, get some tremendous benefit from it. And then I would have somebody, I'm not an expert in this, but I would have somebody see if you can do something with the wiring so everything's properly grounded and you're not surrounding yourself in a Faraday cage of EMF, and then see if you can also put in outlets so that you can have hardwired internet instead of wireless internet in that space.
I love it. I should have called you on these things sooner.
Now that everything's built, right?
No, we're honestly just about to start. So this is great. And then when it's done, we'll have you guys over for dinner and you can see how we pulled it all together.
All right, I'll bring my checklist with me.
I love it. I love it. Sachin, you have a program called 30 in 30. Can you tell us a little bit about what this program is and where people can find out a little bit more about what you're up to?
Sure, absolutely. So my mission statement and the mission statement of really the Living Proof Institute is if we're going to make a dent in this healthcare crisis, it's not going to happen one patient at a time. It's going to happen one community at a time. And it's not going to happen by patients coming in to see us or, even see you or see another practitioner. There just aren't enough practitioners that think this way and have the training, but there's millions of people, tens of millions of people that need this type of service. So what we decided to do is let's take a scalable approach to this. And we believe that the doctor of the future isn't me and you, Megan. I hate to say it, but the doctor of the future is the patient. Because remember, the patient ultimately determines the outcome. So they should know more about their health than I do, and you do, or any other practitioner does. So we started with this 30 in 30 program, and I just said, you know what, I'm just going to give my 30 best tips away that people can do for themselves, and a couple things will happen. We figure that just using the Pareto principle, that 80% of people who follow this program will eliminate their chronic health issue just by promoting their own health. Okay, and they'll displace disease because we don't get a disease, a chronic disease that is, we create a chronic disease, which means we can uncreate that chronic disease and move back to the natural state of health, which is, vitality and function. And so our bodies are already programmed to do that, as you and I and many of the listeners probably know. So let's do that first. It's almost like imagine being a super specialized guy in fixing plants. You would want to know that your clients have watered their plants before they come in, that they're giving them enough sunlight before they come in, that there's soil for the roots to grow, right? And they're taking care of the soil. I would not want to have people come in from all over the world and fly in and spend all this good money to come see me for me to tell them to water their plants, right? So we start with the basics. We start with the fundamentals, because if you're not doing this stuff right now, you're going to have to do it when you come in. You may as well start now and see if that fixes you. If that doesn't fix you, which is the other 20%, then let's dig a little bit deeper. Let's look for stealth infections. Let's look for major nutrient deficiencies that you haven't resolved through the dietary changes you've made. Let's look at, adrenal dysfunction or thyroid dysfunction, and let's start digging a little bit deeper to see why you have these issues. And sometimes it just requires somebody evaluating your blind spots. So selfishly, it brings in better leads, if you will. It brings in the right people who we know are already doing some of the basic and foundational things. And they are the people that are demonstrating that they're willing to take ownership. And that's the exact type of client that we look for, right? Not somebody who's never heard of us, who has diabetes, who we have to basically start from scratch, right? It takes a lot of time and energy to do that. But if I can give that away, it saves me a lot of time and energy. And that saves our patients that are coming into us, it saves them a ton of money because we're not spending time doing things and charging people for things that we can tell them and give away for free.
Right. I couldn't agree more. There's always those basic things that just sort of need to be in place. I always say to people, it's kind of like we're building a condo or a building. And before we start to build, we've got to excavate that soil and we've got to clean it up and we've got to make sure it's full of great nutrients. And then we can do the complicated engineering on top of it. And I love the way you've made that classic to you, so simple for people to be able to understand, but so strategic at the same time. Each month, I'm featuring a new anthropology quiz to help you unlock and uncover some of the physical performance blocks that may be holding you back from your true potential. This month, we are talking about stress and adrenal fatigue. To learn more or to take the quiz, head on over to meganwalker.com/anthropology quiz. Yeah, I'm going to make sure that we have information about that program, how people can follow you if they're not following you on Facebook. It's enlightening on a daily basis, and I really appreciate the opportunity to pop in and see what you're up to. In the last part of the interview here, Sachin, I have 5 quick questions that I want to ask you. They're the kind of questions, they're a little bit open-ended. We could kind of be here all day, but I just want your initial impression with some of them, and I know these are definitely things I have not sent to you beforehand. So some are easy, some you might have to think about, but I suspect you've got really great answers for all of them. My first question in these key performance indicator questions or KPIs is, what time do you go to bed?
I go to bed at 10. For those of you that don't know, a good link, maybe Megan, you can share this. Maybe you're going to be talking about this, but we all have different chronobiologies. And so it's important for entrepreneurs to know this. What works for me now at this point in my life, it didn't always. I was tired before when I wasn't taking care of myself. But what I learned is I'm a lion. So there's 4 different chronotypes. There's lion, there's bear, there's dolphin, and there's wolf. And so some people are night owls, and that's when they're most creative and most productive. And some people, like lions, are morning people. Okay, so I'm up, my eyes are up at 4:30, 5 o'clock. I don't need an alarm. I can't go back to sleep. And some people would pray for that. It's like a gift and a curse. You know what I mean? So I'm out, like my mind mentally shuts off. I can't do good work after 8 p.m. But I put in a solid day. Okay, so I'm very productive, very a very solid day every day that we come into the office. We make a big impact, and so I'm usually mentally shut off at 8, and then my wife is a early to bed type of person, so we're in our bed between 9:30 and 10. Now, here's my little cheat. My son Devin loves when I put him to sleep. It's the only thing he wants from his dad. He could care less if I play with him or dance with him, but the only thing he wants from me at night is for me to put him to bed. So 4 out of 7 nights, sorry, I'll put him to bed at 8:30, and I'll just go to bed at that time because I'm not going to do anything productive after 8 o'clock. So the most productive thing that anyone can do in any area in their life is sleep more. So I'm like, shit, I'm just going to go to sleep. And
Right.
so that's another thing. I have that little caveat there that it's not, hey, like you go to bed at 8:30, that's crazy. It's, I know I put my son to sleep and I don't fight falling asleep. I just go to bed with him.
Do you have a hot beverage of choice? And if so, how do you prepare it?
So I have my, I don't know if it's called bulletproof coffee because I don't add the butter to it, but it is, I use the bulletproof coffee beans. And what I add to it is the brain octane, and I add coconut oil instead of the butter, and I add the collagen protein powder to it. I'll add a drop or two of cardamom oil, and then I'll also add a chocolate greens by a company called Barleans, and I blend that all together. And I'll throw in some maca in there as well. So that's my morning like hot go-to beverage. So it's a bit of work to prepare it and put it together, but I've trained my wife on how to do it now. She's been denying knowing how to make it, and I finally trained her, so now she makes it for me on occasion. So love you, thanks, Deepa. But usually I'll make it like 95 times out of 100. It'll be me making it, and I enjoy it. It's my morning like kind of self-love ritual, and I know I'm putting good healthy nutrients into my body, and the coffee is just one of the ingredients, right? The other stuff is all superfoods, and coffee is a superfood depending on where you get your beans from.
Absolutely. And it's taking those daily habits and leveraging them in a positive way. Sachin, what do you do for fun?
This. How's that for a short answer?
What? Yeah, me too. I'm smiling at that response. It's great. How do you balance business and parenting?
You know what? Having a good wife helps. So as a parent, I could be better, right? I find that, and here's the thing, here's my philosophy on life, is that I believe that we're all individual souls, right? And as parents, we birth these souls into their physical form, but that soul is on its own journey. So I'm not a micromanager type of parent. Like I leave Devin alone because he's on his own journey, right? I'm here to provide him with shelter and some little bit of wisdom as he needs it, but life will teach him all the lessons he needs to learn. And so I'm kind of a hands-off type of parent as from a parenting style standpoint, and I believe that the sooner we learn not to do stupid stuff, the sooner we stop doing it, right? If we bubble wrap our kids and don't let them do stupid things, then they're going to do stupid things when it really counts. I'd rather him do something dumb when he's 6, because usually the younger you are, the less crazy the outcomes are, versus when you're 19 and you do something stupid, then you're in trouble. So I believe our life is a journey where we're supposed to learn all these important and valuable lessons. And as a parent, I feel that the best way I could parent my child and make them grow up from a soul standpoint is to let them learn all these lessons as early as possible in life.
Amazing. Thank you. I'm smiling here because I'm thinking I am going to learn so much having these conversations with people. Thank you. It was so insightful. Last question for you. Are we born entrepreneurs, or do you learn to become that way?
That's kind of what I'm trying to prove. I'm trying to prove that there is a genetic component to the entrepreneurial spirit. Now, that doesn't mean that people who aren't born with that gift or curse, I mean, either way, right? Unrealized entrepreneurs are usually addicts, so it's a gift and a curse, right? The same genetics that makes us crave dopamine could help us build a beautiful business, or it could make us a drug addict. So it's really kind of an interesting paradox, and even to talk about it is I think it's an important dialogue to have, but it's really interesting. I think that I believe that there is a spark of entrepreneurship And you know, if you listen to Michael Gerber's work, he talks about that we all have a little bit of entrepreneur in us, right? We all make some amounts of dopamine, right? So it's not like we don't make any dopamine. We make some. Some of us are going to make more than others, and so you know, you have the entrepreneur, the manager, and the technician, as he describes it. And so there's a bit of all three of those people in each of us, and I think some people just have more entrepreneur in their blood, and there's interesting things that you can, I don't know if you ever did the Eunomics test, but you can learn interesting things about your executive function. And one of the things I learned about myself is I have extremely high dopamine. I tend to make less serotonin. So I do work and I do good work, but I'm never happy with it. So I keep doing, right? And that's how I keep building and creating stuff and solving problems. And the other thing I learned about myself is there's an emotional executive function where you're able to break down stress chemicals much faster than somebody else. So I can take on a lot of stress and not lose my marbles, whereas somebody else might not break down those stress chemicals as fast. So they stay wired for like hours or days at a time in some cases. So that can make you a better entrepreneur for sure, because you can recover from failure so quickly. And there's also another gene that actually measures how quickly you forget emotional events that happen. And so, you know, if you're an entrepreneur and you're traumatized by all your failures, you're not going to last very long. But if you can forget these things and move on, then yes, that can genetically prime you for success as well, at least in today's world. So I'm postulating that there is a genetic component, but I'm also giving hope that others can tap into this as well.
Amazing. As always, your responses in the conversation are just so enlightening. Sachin, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing this time. I appreciate it.
If you enjoyed our conversation and would like to hear more, head on over to Stitcher or iTunes and subscribe to the Anthropology Podcast. We would also really appreciate a quick review. When people have their health, they can change the world. Let us keep you healthy and you go change the world.